Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Tom Caron along with Alex Speier. Back together again, Alex. It feels like it's been a while since we've done this.
It does, and I've missed you, but I'm happy that we're finally back together because I think that this might be big round number episode. This might be the big 100, Tom.
Is it really? How did I know that?
There are rumors of this. I mean, probably because you've missed the last couple. But I'm kidding. I really love having these conversations with you and getting to share the conversations with you, getting to share the conversations with the folks we bring in. So let's have on for the next 210, I guess.
I feel you should be bringing some stats to this. Stat Masterson should be telling us, what the percentage of podcasts that make it 100 episodes, or the percentage that fail on the 101st episode, something like that. But congratulations, happy century mark to all of us. I truly had no idea.
Yeah, we need the graphics of popping bottles and that sort of thing right now. Oversight.
Yeah, nobody sent me anything. Shouldn't we have received bottles to which we could pop? I feel we've missed an opportunity. Ante, we're gonna have to call him out on this. I mean, there should be
note for future episodes. We can make up for it down the road.
$100 bills raining from the ceiling. I mean, something to celebrate the 100. How about a couple Sox wins? I would settle for that right now. It's been a rough stretch at Fenway Park. It's strange how these things happen every year. You go through a stretch where they're not hitting or they're striking out too much. The starting pitching isn't there. On my bingo card, my early season bingo card, I did not have setup relief as a major problem for this team. But we've seen it out of nowhere, and it's been an ugly stretch. I think, as you said it in the Globe, Alex, it's maybe too early to talk about it as a trend. But man, we've seen too many leads blown after the sixth inning here.
It's been super surprising, and it's all happened in 1 week, right? Like, that should have been a great week for the Red Sox because they had just come off of a nice stretch, right? They rolled through Cleveland, win 2 out of 3. The offense looks like it's clicking. Then they get into Toronto, they roll them. Then they go up 6-0 in the second game in Toronto, and all of a sudden, boom goes the dynamite, and everything kind of fell apart. Starting in those last few innings, where cruising to what should have been an easy victory with everything in a good spot. Like, all of a sudden you have this succession of the kind of gut punch late innings losses that we've seen in a cluster, right? They had only had one of them before the middle of last week, and then all of a sudden they had 3 of them in 5 games. And so it looks really bad, particularly because they were all of the multi-run variety. And those are things that are painful for teams to absorb, but they happen. They tend to happen in clusters. They're magnified when they happen early in the season. But I do think that it's going to be very interesting to see how the bullpen comes together over the course of the season, because their one big ticket item was Chapman. He's been great thus far this season, but otherwise they added Justin Wilson and didn't really reach for kind of high-end, quote-unquote, setup guys because they had Liam Hendricks coming back, but right now he's still working his way back into leverage. We're still, Garrett Whitlock is still working his way back into being the pitcher that he wants to be. Justin Slayton is still at a very early career point, so there was a lot that was unsettled with the setup crew or the crew surrounding Chapman, and I think that the optics of that are magnified when you have a series of struggles all stacked together like this.
And coinciding with that is a strange dynamic offensively right now where this team is scoring a lot of runs early in games and not tacking on runs as the games progress, right? I think they're amongst the league leaders. I think they have the most home runs in the first 3 innings, up near the top in runs scored, innings 1 through 3, but that number goes down. And a lot of these blown leads were 1 or 2 run leads in the 7th inning, 6th inning, as opposed to big leads that maybe would have been safer. So that's a strange thing that the strikeouts have started to rear their ugly head again. That's been a streaky thing with this team. They've been striking out up around 10 times a game again, and that's kind of been the danger zone for them, as it should be really for any team. But that we're going to talk about all this in a few minutes. Pete Fatsy, the hitting coach, is going to join us here on the show. But I think they're 12-4 when they don't strike out 10 times in a game. So that seems like a pretty simple fix. Strike out less, you will win more games.
Yeah, there's the hitting is a balance, right? And I think that the question of strikeouts goes hand in hand with, are you chasing pitches? And so one of the other things that we're seeing is that when strikeouts with walks are okay, right? Like if you have a bunch of plate appearances in a game and you end up striking out because you have a bunch of hits and walks surrounding that, then that's really good. Hits are going to be somewhat inconsistent. We know about the kind of chaos of balls in play. That's the batting average goes up, down, fluctuates all over the place. Walks tend to be pretty stable, but they haven't been with this team. So like in this recent stretch of at the beginning of May, the first handful of games in May, they have something like a 3% walk rate. So they're not putting themselves in position to have a rally when the offense is going up and down. So, you can look at it as the question of strikeouts, or you can look at it as they have a 3-10 record when they walk 2 times or fewer. And so we're seeing a lot of those games recently, which means that you probably have an atypical amount of chase happening, and that's when things start to unravel.
And of course, the big news of the past week was Friday night when Triston Casas went down, successful surgery, and by all accounts, he's doing well, but season-ending surgery on his knee. And instantly, one of the places where you didn't have a lot of depth, one position where Roman Anthony wasn't waiting for a chance to play first base. Marcelo Mayer wasn't waiting for a chance to play first base. And a guy who maybe could play first base as your designated hitter used to play third base. And it's just all very interesting. Of all the positions for someone to go down, first base is a conundrum for this team now.
It's an interesting one, and we shouldn't discount the fact that Romy Gonzalez has actually been pretty good, at least offensively, sure, in his fill-in role. But at the same time, you want power from that spot in the lineup. You would love to have some middle-of-the-order thunder that you're able to add from both the first base and DH slots. And so right now, in kind of having Devers fixed in the DH spot, and Alex Cora has kind of continued to say, I haven't talked to him about it. I don't plan to talk to him about moving out of DH and being a first base. Then it means that you have a Romy Gonzalez and Abraham Toro platoon, which isn't necessarily again. Both of those guys have actually had pretty good at bats over the few days since Triston Casas went down in that really unfortunate and hard to watch injury. But you're looking for juice from those 2 positions, and right now they're probably only positioned to get it from one of those.
Well, who was not as definitive about Rafael Devers not being part of the potential solution at first base was Chief Baseball Officer Craig Brezlow. He has not said anything along the lines of he's going to be our first baseman, but again, not as definitive in shooting it down. He joined us on the pregame show last night. He sat down with me to talk about the state of the team, and obviously we got into first base. Let's hear what he had to say, beginning with the recent struggles of holding on to leads late in the game. Here's Craig Brezlow from NESN's pregame show on 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers. Craig Brezlow, Chief Baseball Officer, joins us now. Closing in on the quarter poll, Craig, 18-18. We're talking about 9 of those 18 losses are 1-run losses. When you look at that, is that disappointing because those are games you could win? Is that a sign that, you're right there, it's not a massive overhaul? How do you sort of assess what we've seen so far?
Yeah, well, I think you look at where you are relative to where you thought you would be, and there's no question, our expectations are heightened for this season, and so it's disappointing in that I think there were winnable games that got away from us, and you can look back at the end of a season and point to particular losses, and in a lot of ways that could shape your season. But it's early, and there are some things that we're doing pretty well, and right now it seems like we're kind of less the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and more that the parts individually look pretty good, but they're not coming together to win games, and that's something that we need to fix. Anytime
you lose a player, a starter, for a season-ending injury, that is a big blow. Triston Casas' injury kind of shocked the system last year. It's also a position where you didn't have a platoon going, and there were some questions about that. First of all, how is Triston doing? We talked to Alex Cora today, said he spoke with him today. The surgery went well. Can you give us an update on how that's all gone?
Yeah. So he's in good hands. We believe in our medical staff, and Triston feels very comfortable with us. But it was a significant surgery, obviously a season-ending injury, and more than anything, you just feel for Triston, given what he's been through the last, not just last year, but the last few years. And we had high hopes for him. He had high hopes for himself, and we're going to have to press pause on those right now.
Toro tonight, and I always will sort of chuckle at spring training when you look at some of the players who brought in and signed, right, that fans aren't talking about. And you say, this guy's probably going to be important before it's all said and done. It's just a reminder that there's no such thing as an insignificant move to a major league team, right? You end up diving into that depth sometimes earlier than you'd want to, but these are the guys you need to sort of help you through a season.
No doubt about it. And there are guys who, you initially sign as depth who go on to play critical roles. And you look back at successful seasons and you think about, guys like Koji Uehara or Shane Victorino or Johnny Gomes, who were, more intended to be complementary pieces who play prominent roles on really successful teams. And, it's a credit, I think, to the pro scouting group and those who identified guys like Toro who could come in and fill a need. But that conversation is obviously fluid, and we'll need to figure out not just this short-term, kind of solution, but something longer-term as well.
Might be easier to list the people who have not been rumored as a possible first base fix. But obviously, Rafael Devers is the guy who played a corner infield. He was the third baseman prior to the acquisition of Bregman. Is there any thought, after not playing any position here for about a quarter of a season, to try to get him at first base? And how tough would that be to get him going at a position now?
Yeah, well, I think we need to be sensitive to how we've gotten to this moment. We also need to be willing to put all ideas and options on the table. So we're still kicking things around internally. And I think the one thing that we will do is try to uncover every rock to figure out how to make the team as competitive as we can.
Vaughn Grissom's been playing some first base. He's back at second base today. He's off to a great start offensively. Is he a guy who will get more time at first with the possibility of being part of that mix?
Yeah, he's definitely a guy that we want to get a longer look at. At this moment, I think he's got 4 games in Worcester at first base, but he's someone that we've always believed can hit, and the start of this season gives no indication that we'd be wrong at that, right? And not only is he hitting, but he's hitting the ball hard, and he's slugging a little bit, and so we're really encouraged with what we're seeing from him.
You've been asked a lot in this scenario about Anthony and Mayer, not because either necessarily profiles as a first baseman, but fans are excited to find a way to see them at the major league level. Tell us about that a little bit. When you've got 2 prospects who've shown so much promise, who have come so far at their positions, how difficult would it be to have them suddenly pick up a new position at the major league level?
Yeah, and I think that that excitement is merited based on the talent that they have and the impact that we believe they're going to have at the big league level. But it's a hard enough transition to go from the minor leagues to the big leagues and to try to learn a new position alongside that. I think it's a difficult ask. And both of those guys are good defenders at their positions as things currently stand. So we're really excited about what they're doing, and we're really excited about what we think they're capable of doing in the big leagues. But more than likely, that's going to come at the positions that they're familiar with.
Last segment, we were talking about Masataka Yoshida. We heard from him today. Feels good at the plate, but the throwing has not gone well. How frustrating is that there's a guy who maybe could help you, but he's not fully ready to come back in the role you want him at?
Yeah, I think it's frustrating for Masa in that he sees a path to impacting the club, and it's frustrating for us because he's a guy that we'd love to to have as an option. And we talked about the path at bats being to be able to play in the field, and unfortunately, his recovery at the plate has outpaced what he's able to do in the field right now, and so he's still having hurdles as it relates to getting through the throwing, and we need him to be able to play defense.
All right, so there's a lot there, much more definitive that Roman Anthony and Marcelo Mayer are not playing first base anytime soon. But interesting to hear him talk about Rafael Devers, the internal conversations that will continue. What do you make of all this?
He's not saying no, and that is different than Alex Cora very clearly saying no. Look, over the course of the offseason, we saw a similar thing play out, right? Whenever we asked Craig Brezlow about whether or not Rafael Devers might move off of third base, he never said no. He said, if we have that conversation, we would have it with Rafi Devers first. Alex Cora, meanwhile, would say, he's my third baseman. Until he wasn't. And then they signed Alex Bregman at the beginning of spring training, and Alex Bregman spends a day at second base before Alex Cora, at that point was opening it up by saying, well, we'll work this all out, before saying anything definitive. And it wasn't until the end of spring when he said the thing that was very obvious, which is that Rafael Devers was not going to be the third baseman of the Boston Red Sox at the beginning of the season. And give Devers credit. He's done a terrific job of adjusting to a different routine that is not intuitive. His offensive approach and offensive production since the beginning of April has been excellent. His swing decisions, which we'll get into with Pete Fatsy, have been have been as good as they've ever been in his career. He's now hitting the ball really hard. He's doing a really good job as a DH and seems to have found a routine with that. But, when you ask the question, what's the best Red Sox roster, at least with the internal pool of players that they have, it kind of makes a natural, it intuitively, it's hard not to say that would feature, if he's open to it and if he's capable of it, Rafael Devers at first base, so that you could eventually get Masataka Yoshida back into the lineup. He doesn't have any more, it doesn't hurt him to hit, hurts him to throw. So there's a path there. There's a position for someone like that, and it's called DH. But right now it's blocked. So it's a really interesting dynamic that the organization seems like it's working through.
Lou Merloni was making the interesting case for Triston Casas, somebody who's already learned a couple different positions, who by all accounts has an aptitude to learn new positions, and who has not really been that entrenched in any one position. He's a quarter of the way into his first major league season. Is there anyone on this team right now that you'd consider moving to open the door for a Mayer or Anthony and do it that way?
The Campbell question that Lou is bringing up is a really interesting one, because he's shown an ability to learn really quickly on the fly, but they seem to love so much the idea of working, and you can see the progress from him at second base. And so do you want to shut that off? I don't know what the long-term implications of that would be. It's a tricky dynamic. And you don't, again, just as with Campbell's the same way as Devers, right? You don't want to upset the apple cart too much as he's learning the routines of being a big leaguer. Devers is learning the routines of being a big league DH. So that's a tricky one, but I think that there should be an openness, or at least the conversation should be one that is had, because when Marcelo Mayer will be in the big leagues at some point in the not too distant future, and what does the infield look like when that happens? How do you get him? How do you get him onto the field? So Campbell at first base would be one way of opening that path. You can ask the question about Trevor Story and whether or not he's someone who can move, because we saw what happened when he moved to second base. It was this was a fish to water transition where he looked like a Gold Glover as soon as he started playing that position. So he's shown the ability to adapt really well. But again, you have an opportunity with Devers, who continues to take ground balls at third base at a position which is a position he's not going to play. What would be the harm of? I do get it. I do get that there could be a downside to doing so, but why not see what those routine pregame ground balls, if he could move the routine over to first base, as Paul Molitor told me he did when he made the transition to full-time DH back in 1991.
Did you hear Kevin Millar last night? Were you able to hear his rant, if you want to, about how it shouldn't be that hard to move a guy over to first base? And Millar went full. Back when I was playing the game in my day, you got asked, there'd be a line of guys going in there saying, Skip, I could play first base. Put me over there. And he says, baseball just kind of gets so caught up in its own head now sometimes about disrupting any kind of process or taking a risk at something. And, he's rattling off guys who didn't start at first base, but became really good first basemen. Again, sometimes we say it's too easy. Anybody can play first base. As we know from Moneyball, it's incredibly hard. But it's also something that a major league player with a little bit of time should adapt to. Do you think baseball gets too caught up in itself these days and sort of looks past the fact that these guys are great athletes and could probably handle the move?
Yeah, and I wonder whether or not that that reflects the broader structure of the game right now. It used to be that you would have time to go out and take a number of grounders at a number of positions, and right now it feels like it's meeting. So there's this hyperstructure surrounding baseball that maybe gets in the way of the idea of just being out on the field and and being able to bounce around between positions. But I think we should never use Mookie Betts as an example of how position change can happen, because Mookie Betts is a shapeshifter with superhuman, probably X-Men powers. But nonetheless, Mookie used to make a point of, back starting in the minor leagues, taking balls at different positions that he wasn't playing at a time when he was the everyday second baseman in the minors. He made a point of every day going out, taking some grounders at short, taking some balls in the outfield, and making sure that the Red Sox would see him doing so that they would know that there were a few options out there, with a guy named Dustin Pedroia completely blocking up the position that he was at. I do think that there's a specific dynamic that's taken place with Devers that's really interesting to see unfolding, right? Like the Red Sox chose not to talk with Devers about the pursuit of the Bregmans, Arenados of the world, at least to the best of our knowledge, until it's kind of getting down to towards the finish line. And maybe they could have gotten out in front of that at the beginning of the offseason if they had said, look, like we think that we agree with you that we are going to reach for, we're looking to swing big in terms of upgrading the roster. And one way that, we're not saying this will happen, but one way that could happen is by adding a right-handed bat. The best right-handed bats are third baseman, Bregman, Arenado in this offseason. And so it would give us, more flexibility if maybe, if you were comfortable starting to think about maybe first base, and then maybe they're having that conversation in the offseason so that we're not getting into May and there's an injury at a position where they didn't have depth and they have to ask the question of do we or don't we approach Rafael Devers about this question. So it is interesting to hear Millar talking about that. And how do you conduct business in the way that best serves the roster and the players? It's an open question.
Of course, I think Christian Arroyo made it 4 innings when they asked him to play first base, and the hamstring injury was pretty severe after that. So, there is an argument against doing it as well. All right, I want to get to Pete Fatsy. Let's run this because Pete Fatsy, hitting coach of the Red Sox, has been here with the team now, hired in 2019. Couple years the assistant coach, Tim Hires, now fourth season as the hitting coach. So here's the conversation with Pete Fatsy, Red Sox hitting coach on 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers. Want to welcome Red Sox hitting coach Pete Fatsy to the show in the middle of the Ranger series. Pete, thanks for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me, guys.
Pete, it's great to see you, and I'm excited to talk to you because I try to make sense from time to time about what the heck the job of the hitting coach is. And I think that on a surface level, we kind of know, right? Like you are trying to be part of a team that scores runs, but your focus is a little bit more granular than that, right? Like figuring out the different elements that go into run making, if you will. What do you care about the most? Like what when you are dreaming of hitting stats or approach stats, what keeps you up at night, or what allows you to sleep soundly?
Yeah, I think we're always chasing execution as hitting coaches, right? I think there's a level of preparation that we go throughout the course of the day, whether that's, swing or approach related. But at the end of the day, it has to come together with an execution. If we're talking about statistics that we value, obviously, like run scoring is really important to me. How many we're able to push across each night, that's the most important piece. But the layers behind that, obviously putting yourself in a position to get on base and maximizing those opportunities. And then, when you're putting the ball in play, how are you doing it? So I'm always paying attention to, hitting the ball hard. Are we making solid contact, which, typically is the result of swinging good pitches. And then from there, kind of trying to balance things within execution. Are we swinging at pitches that we're supposed to be swinging at and missing them, which, again, that comes to a matchup swing execution thing, or are we swinging at pitches outside the strike zone, which is a game planning piece? So trying to kind of weigh all those factors and then kind of come to an understanding of how that's helping us or hurting us score runs.
I'm glad that you brought up all of those elements because those are things that I tend to zero in on. And in fact, I have a whole cheat sheet of ways of measuring the things that you just talked about, right? So you guys are hitting the snot out of the ball. I think you guys lead Major League Baseball in terms of hard hit percentage, in terms of 50th percentile exit velocity. You're second in barrels per plate appearance. That's really good. Although I will note one bit of weirdness, which is that you guys are one of the less productive teams on your barrels. I think, you play in a cold weather environment. Maybe that plays into it. Your chase percentage. It is you chase kind of middle of the pack, 28% rate, 13th in MLB. Your in-zone swing, the pitches you're attacking, you guys are doing an amazing job. You guys are far and away the most aggressive team at swinging at pitches in the zone, 71%. That's first. You're swinging and missing at a pretty high rate of pitches in the zone, 18%, which is the third lowest rate. But so it feels like you're a team that is swinging at the right ones, in your words, right? Like you're swinging at pitches in the zone. The chase is at a modest level. You're making hard contact. There is some swing and miss in the zone. Overall, based on the things you care about, how would you describe the approach that you've been seeing thus far this year in an offense that's been a little bit up and down?
Yeah, I think, you kind of nailed it. I think for me, the miss in zone is something you're always trying to solve for, because again, that kind of pertains to the matchup, the type of for the most part, the type of quality fastball. Is it a big ride heater? Obviously, is it more of a runner sinker? And how that plays with kind of the rest of the mix. But I think predominantly for me, it's always being cognizant of fastball execution in zone. So it's no surprise for those that watch, right? I think that at times can be our Achilles heel, and it's something that we're always prioritizing. And kind of with that, just making sure that we're getting those pitches in the right area, because obviously there's in zone, there's heart, there's shadow, there's different parts of the zone. So monitoring, we're being aggressive, but making sure those are over the heart of the plate, that's really important. And like I said before, if we're getting pitches over the heart, we're putting swings on them and we're missing, like that's an execution thing for me. There's swing execution, intention, all those sorts of things come into play. I do think the guys have done a nice job balancing the chase rates. I think we've, again, we're middle of the pack. I do think that we've done a pretty good job there. So I think for me, I've been happy with a lot of the execution. I think the ebbs and flows of the season, it's natural. There's going to be days you score 10 or weeks where you score, it feels like 6 to 10 every night. And then there's kind of matchups in weeks where you're grinding for 3 to 5 runs. But our goal is, especially as it goes into a daily basis, is how do we execute, score four off the starter, get it to our bullpen, and do some work. So for me, it's about trying to get to that starter, get him out in the 5th, run the pitch counts up. That's kind of our primary emphasis.
Pete, probably the biggest old school, new school debate, right, for fans is strikeouts. There are more strikeouts in the game than ever before, and we could dive into, pitching is at a level we've never seen before, the velocity, the shape of stuff, all of that, right? You can do everything you've been talking about and still strike out. That's part of baseball, and it's probably more part. Now, we always talk about, do you shorten up the swing on 2 strikes? You look at the numbers. You guys have had success in 2 strikes, right? 18 home runs on 2 strikes, amongst the best in baseball. 5 home runs on 0-2 counts. So, the production has been there on 2 strikes. Yet the strikeouts have added up, right? You are amongst the leaders in strikeouts. And I always look at the stat. It's a simple one, right? You're 6-15 when you strike out 10 times. You're 12-4 when you don't strike out 10 times. All of that to say is, take us into sort of the modern baseball mind, their approach at the plate. Do they shorten up? Do they change with 2 strikes? Or what's the philosophy of today's baseball player?
Yeah, I think obviously for me, whenever I talk about 2 strikes or looking at 2 strikes, it's always about how you're getting there, and it kind of goes back to some of the conversation or the information Alex had talked about, right? Am I getting to 2 strikes because I'm missing pitches to hit, or am I getting 2 strikes because I'm chasing? I think when we're striking out less, for the most part, I think our bats or plate appearances with 2 strikes goes down, right? So a lot of times you're finishing the execution before you even get to 2 strikes, and we all know that roughly 50% of plate appearances are going to end in 2 strikes anyway, so having something that you can go back to. And I think a lot of it, again, is setting yourself up to eliminate chase on the breaking ball, or eliminate chase in general, right? Like with 2 strikes, pitchers are trying to make pitches look like strikes that finishes balls. It's either fastballs, forcing fastball well up and out of the zone, or a breaking ball that starts maybe mid-thigh that finishes down and away. So putting yourself in a position to see the ball as long as you can, to be on time with the fastball in the zone, to see the expansion on the breaking ball. Guys do it a bunch of different ways. Some guys quiet down. Some guys will back their field up. So maybe if they're on time for a fastball to center field, maybe they shift it to the opposite field gap. But I think we're always trying to balance that conversation. It's a very similar conversation to hitting with runners in scoring position. It's like, the approach of a pitcher when there's somebody at third base, for me is, they're trying to get ahead and wipe you out. They want weak contact. They want to punch you out. They want the at bat to be over. So I think that the best way to manage those situations is finding a balanced approach on the fastball. And again, that differs for each guy. And then ultimately trying to eliminate as much chase as you can in those situations.
Also, what differs for each guy, right, is how you present the information. Some guys are can't get enough. Some guys want it dumbed down. Some guys, and when you're struggling, you as a hitting coach really have to decipher when's the right time to present some of this. Take us through that balance a little bit. When a guy's going through a real rough time, you got to be careful that you're not just presenting him with a whole bunch of data, because probably he just wants to be reminded how he got here and why he's a good hitter and some of the positives. Like, take us through that tight wire that you got to walk from time to time.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you asked about the role of a hitting coach. I mean, sometimes positive reinforcement coach or therapist or, honesty coach, like sometimes, making sure when you present information to a player, number one, has to make sense to the player. Like if it's something that they don't necessarily value, how do you help them assign value? I think when to say something, but also when to say nothing is also an art. Like sometimes you have to just keep helping a guy work through a certain situation, but then obviously interventions, we try and make those as quickly as possible. But how we do it and what we show, it depends on the player. And ultimately, too, it depends on what we're trying to solve for. I think when you build strong relationships with guys, we have obviously like a guy like Bregman's new this year, but we spent a long time with a lot of these guys over the last couple of years. So through those relationships, we have an understanding of what matters and what resonates with certain guys, and then we just pull those levers as we need. I tend to think that there's some guys that really like numbers, for instance. Like you can show them percentages, you can show them usage numbers, and that resonates. I do feel like there's another kind of core group of players that like visuals, whether that's heat maps, pitch locations, video in general, just watching at bats or working through at bats. I think it just depends on what resonates most with the player. But again, if you kind of learn that through the relationships you build, asking really good questions, and then kind of going from there.
So as you get to the level of coaching individuals, right? Like you mentioned how central it is to be swinging at the right pitches. Seems like a fundamental thing. You guys have, as I said, you guys have kind of middle of the pack chase rates overall. We've seen two different sides of that spectrum this season. Rafael Devers for me is like, it's mind blowing to see how disciplined he's been in terms of spitting on pitches that are even an inch or two outside of the zone. At the same time, we've seen a kind of continuation, or after seeing Cedar Rafaela look like he might be reining it in spring training, we've now once again seen really aggressive swing decisions. Trevor's Story, same thing. We're seeing a pretty decent amount of kind of high in the league level of expansion of the zone. With Story and Rafaela specifically, like how do you approach their swing decisions in the same way, or how do you work with them individually to kind of tighten what they're chasing?
Yeah, I think it's anytime somebody is starting, regardless of who it is let's say they're chasing too much or they're just swinging, the swing rates climb, right? You start to see the 61, 62%, which is a red flag. For me, it comes down for the area and what you're looking to hit, as opposed to not thinking about not swinging. It's how do we prioritize the area that we do want to swing. Cedar is an aggressive hitter by nature. We know that. When he has been in his best, and he's made significant improvements also with just his general decisions throughout the course of this year, a lot of it is focusing the energy on where we want to swing. Not saying don't swing, but this is where we're focused on swinging. And then it also comes into kind of the game planning aspect of like, this is how this guy is going to try and get you out. So let's make sure we're doing this to keep our sights in the area throughout the course of the at-bat. And know that if we're going to go down throughout the at-bat, this is how we're going to go down. Like I said with Trevor, Trevor, again, he's been an aggressive guy throughout the season. We want him to tap into the athleticism, be ready to hit, mistakes, and he did a really good job. I think the league has adjusted a little bit, and that's a conversation, we've had and we'll continue to have. And I think a lot of it is, again, prioritizing what half of the plate or what quadrant, however you want to think about it, quadrant of the plate you want to isolate. And then it's really about building confidence to that spot in your work. If you want a ball that's close to you, well, we're going to make sure we prioritize those locations in your work today. Or if, we want to look for something else maybe in the secondary, like we're going to prioritize that in the work. Because again, it comes down to what do we feel will set you up for the most success at 6:45, 7 o'clock. And then kind of getting the eyes dialed into, that part of execution. And then ultimately getting the feel that you want to execute the swing, is really important too. But there's no doubt that, confidence also plays a role. Like when you're feeling good, I feel like guys tend to see the ball a little bit better. When you feel like you're scratching and clawing, you've lined out, 10 times, sometimes you want that next hit, and sometimes you have to remind yourself that the process comes by swinging good pitches. It's really hard to hit elite pitches elite pitching that is outside the zone. It's hard enough to hit it inside the zone, so we're not doing ourselves any favors by the expansion. But sometimes it's literally just a reminder, it's conversation. And then building the guys back up. This is a tough game. It's hitting it. I say it all the time. Hitting is hard. So for us, it's reminding ourselves, how do we make it the simplest version of hitting that we can?
I'm curious, as we talk about individuals, you guys have had two different approaches to hitters meetings over the course of your time as the hitting coach of the Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you guys have had you guys for a number of years, starting when you were like during the time that you were assistant hitting coach and into your first couple of years as the lead hitting coach. It was kind of group meetings before every game. Last year, with a younger group, you kind of tailored it a little bit more to be more individual. Where are you guys at now? Are you having those conversations? Are these collective conversations, or are you focused more on going person by person?
Yeah, I think the answer is it's always person by person. It just depends on the setting. So, you know, every day we'll have an individual game plan with what we think the priority should be for that player in the cage, because I think that, you know, ultimately these guys come to the field with an idea of what they want to execute that day, and then it's a conversation between them. Hey, what's the intention for today? And then for us, okay, this is what we've also seen, or hey, you're right on point. Let's execute today. So that's happening every day. I think the group meeting for me in my time has always been about, you know, the day is so fragmented with so many different responsibilities players have, whether it's, you know, obviously the S&C component, medical, media obligations. You know, when you're at home, there's family stuff. I just find that the 10 minutes that we get together to kind of come together, sit down, and just talk about the starter. Have, you know, obviously I give myself and Joe Cronin, one of my assistants, gives the kind of general overview. Whatever maybe the theme we think should be for that guy, if there's something specific that we think we can identify or exploit, it's good to have kind of group discussion about that. But as far as the individual stuff, you know, I think about when I was an assistant, you know, the meeting is really about the players, you know, the players driving the conversation. It's less impactful if I'm the only one sitting there talking about information, because I'm not the one towing the line that day. But we are fortunate that we have some guys in our clubhouse that take pride in obviously the preparation aspect. So I lean into those guys a lot in the meeting setting to kind of voice what they see, voice what they think. But ultimately, regardless of the structure, I think last year we made the pivot exactly for that reason. I felt like it was kind of a good opportunity for us to just kind of slow the minds down, get guys thinking about preparation a little bit differently. And you know, I think the meeting is more just about getting the guys together for 10 minutes to get the minds right, because again, our day is so fragmented at times around the ballpark.
I've always thought hitting coach is the most thankless job in all of baseball. You know, like a pitching coach, you could, you know, go out and get 6 shutout innings from a starter, a couple 3 innings from a setup, then the closer. He goes home feeling pretty good at night. You could have a night where you score 6-7 runs, you got 14 hits, but you got 3 guys who went 0 for 4 and 2 guys who struck out 3 times. You got to talk to them. There's very few nights where everybody in the lineup gets a hit, right? How do you make sure that doesn't eat away at you? We know, you know, it's a short shelf life, right? The average lifespan of a hitting coach in Major League Baseball today is like 2.5 years or something like that. How do you keep it from getting to you?
Dang, now you make me feel, I'm at like 6, so I feel like now I'm like a veteran or something. No, I think a lot of it is perspective. Tim Hires is really good about, he's a great friend of mine, obviously. He's the one that hired me here back in the fall of 2019. And to be honest, I learned a lot from him about balancing kind of the emotional response, because the game is so emotional. And you kind of have to, that's where I feel like your own processes, like, I mean, me personally, like I'm in the gym every day. I run, AC and I run quite a bit. Like there's individual processes that I have to make sure that my mind's right every day. But I also think it's just about managing the emotional response. Like, you know, when is it about the quality of the bat? When is it about, hey, we're doing a lot of things right, we're just not scoring runs, and that's because of X, Y, or Z. Hey, we hit the ball hard 7 times last night. We got nothing to show for it. Or, hey, you know what? We went with this game plan. He flipped the script. We didn't adjust fast enough, right? It's just knowing when to identify what is actually happening, as opposed to just being upset about it. And again, like I feel like Timmy helped me kind of understand that, especially the scope of 162, what that means to be in this thing every single day. And I really do try and embrace the mindset that, you know, every day is a new opportunity to execute, score runs, win a baseball game. And I think closing the book on the day before, taking the things that you need to from, hey, we learned this today, or we were exposed this way, what can we take from this into tomorrow? I think that's a really important part of like my reflection process. And then, you know, if you're doing a good job with that and you have processes built in place to kind of evaluate player performance, team performance, it just becomes more systematized. So I try and look at it like that more than anything else. And then again, you're always, you're always working individually with every guy, and every day somebody comes in and, maybe there's a different feel or different thought, and it's our job to keep prioritizing the things that we matter most with the players. We know matter most to the players.
Well, here's a news flash. You are one of the veteran guys, right? I mean, 22 is your first year. There's only 3 teams left with the hitting coach they had in 2021. So I mean, that's how much turnaround there's been. And we just saw it, right? Texas is here. Brett Boone came in on Monday. Donnie Ecker helped them win a World Series. First one in franchise history. A year and a quarter later, they want to go with a different voice. Anytime the Sox go in a slump, someone is calling into a radio station for your job. That's right. That's part of it. You grew up here. I mean, you get that.
Yeah,
this is tougher than most markets.
I might have called a radio station when I was a kid.
So who can blame you for losing their job? This would be we could have them call in.
Yeah, I think I heard this quote from Joe Mazzulla about pressure being a privilege, and I think that's the thing that we all want here. Is there's no better place when we're winning and this place is buzzing, but that comes at a price. Like there's no in between. Like I could use the line and say I'm from here. I understand what the Red Sox mean, and I understand the investment. I understand why there's so much media attention and coverage, because people really care, and I get it. So for me, it's like, there's nobody more upset, or like frustrated if things aren't going well than, I guess the people in our clubhouse. Like we want to win every single night. Again, where I've learned to check myself is some of the objective nature. When is it actually time to make, when is it something we need to be really concerned about? Or when is it just part of the process and we have to be able to flush this one, move on quickly? Trying to be as objective as you can. I do think that helps you sleep better at night.
It's also, coaching is so different now, right? You've got 2 assistant coaches, assistant hitting coaches. We see there's offensive coordinators, there's game planning coordinators, right? That we are constantly in a period now where teams are trying to find new and different ways to directly connect with the player. How different is it even from when you started? By the assistant coaches who can take some of the load. Like, take us through how different it is from when you came in and hired in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was just Timmy and myself, right? So, obviously Timmy handled a lot of the game planning aspects, some of the additional preparation, the materials, and my job was really, JD Martinez was a lot of my job at the time, but like it was really making sure that I had guys' swings in my back pocket. We're like, we're not the bus driver, we're the mechanics. Like making sure the tire was inflated, the oil's changed, like, hey, the steering wheel's off. Like you're just kind of continuously monitoring these guys, and then, hey, by the way, you're expanding the zone on 4 seams right now. Like, let's bring our zone back down to the belt. We're looking a little bit too high here. Like little things like that. I think that what I'm fortunate with my group, I've been with Ben. This is our 4th year together. Joe is one of my other assistants who does a lot of the information for me. This is our 3rd year together. Dylan, who I've known from afar, but obviously getting to work with now this year. One of the things I try to create is kind of roles and responsibilities for each of us that we can kind of own every single day. And then naturally, you kind of have players that fall into, different priority players that we have. Jaron obviously works really closely with Rosie. Breggy and Dylan have worked really closely together and trying to create processes for each guy so that we can kind of dominate spaces. But at the end of the day, the thing that I think we do a really good job of is the communication, is making sure we're all on the same page, overly communicating. And at the end of the day, like, we come up with the best solution for each guy based on the feedback that we're giving to each other, and then we go execute it. So the communication for us leads to some of that execution.
One thing that is different, the personnel changes, right? And you mentioned Alex Bregman. He seems like a fascinating one to work with, right? In a different way than a JD Martinez, but by his own admission, he's a baseball obsessive personality. Yeah. What is Alex Bregman's voice? What is he bringing with his voice into those hitters' meetings? And can you peel back the curtain a little bit on his process? Because my guess is that it's an atypical one.
Yeah, he's a winner. Like he embodies winning. I mean, he is relentlessly prepared. He knows himself extremely well, studies the opposition extremely well, understands what it takes day in and day out to win baseball games. Like I said, it's a detailed attention. It's an attention to detail, but it's also like this relentless pursuit every single day, coming in, ready to work. If there's something he needs to address, he addresses it. He works on it till he gets it right, and then he moves on. And it's very similar actually in a sense to how JD worked. Like JD would go at bat to at bat, like it was about the swing and the execution, and if something was off, he'd make the adjustment. I feel like Bregman has a lot of those same qualities, and I just think he has this nature to connect with people, like whether it's catchers, pitching staff, hitters, the cook. He just has this innate ability to connect with people and draw and ask like really good questions. And he's very thoughtful. And I think when you have somebody with that sort of mentality, that's that passionate about winning, I think it only helps your ball club. Aside from the performance that he has in the field, it only helps the ball club. So.
I'll kind of, thinking about where Bregman has been slotting, obviously he's been incredibly productive thus far. You've seen some ups and downs from different guys in the lineup, but it does seem like you're getting to a place where, Duran, Devers, Bregman at the top of the lineup has given you some has started to formulate some interesting consistency. I guess, what are your expectations for this offense as it does kind of fit together and you get a little bit more consistency out of it? Where do you think, as you look at the talent base in this offense, what's the standard that you're holding yourself to in terms of the production that you believe it's capable of?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, it's about building an offense that can win in October, win the last game of the year. And I think to do that, you have to have a dynamic offense that can do different things when the game calls for it. When the game calls to be able to hit a four seam, you have to make an adjustment to hit the four seam if we're going to prioritize it. If the game calls for, we got a Barrios or we have a Native Aldi, that's moving the fastball around, he's mixing in the secondary appropriately, we have to execute against certain pitch types and locations. I think that it's to be the best offense in baseball. That is bar none. And that's our standard for how we execute, everything from the materials that we print out, the processes, the documentation, all the processes that go in place to me are first class. They're, and I think that's really important, because it sets the standard for our work, which is, again, I think we challenge our guys. I think the thing about our group that is really special is they're not afraid to challenge themselves. We push these guys to be great, and I think that's the area that separates us in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, the goal is to be the best offense in baseball. Whether that's scoring the most runs, having the highest WOBA, OPS, however you want to break it down. 800 runs was the bar last year, right? And that's something I've talked a lot about when you look at run scoring offenses. If you score 100 runs, you're probably in the playoffs. So how do we keep converting runs throughout the course of the season? And then, how do we continuously find a middle ground where, we're facing a tough arm, or we're inevitably in a stretch where we're scoring 3-4 runs a game. How do we scratch out that extra run, right? Is it, what style of baseball or what mentality do we have to get that extra run, when they're not coming in bunches? You know what I mean? So, but I think the bar is to be playing the last day of the season and win. That's at the end of the day, that's the expectation.
And that's the perfect way to finish this. Pete, we appreciate the visit, continued success, and keep beating the odds, because obviously you're just you've been at this so long now, as we've established. One of the deans of the hitting coaches. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Appreciate the visit, Pete. We'll talk soon. Thanks. Great conversation with Pete Fatsy. It is strange, Alex, to think of him as one of the more experienced hitting coaches in Major League Baseball. But that's, 4 years is, as I said, a year and a half beyond the average lifespan. 2.4 years is the average lifespan of a Major League hitting coach right now.
We're dealing with a chaotic era in Major League Baseball, right? And in baseball across the board, there's a lot of change going on in terms of how technology is being used, what statistics are being used. So to be able to make it 4 years, you have to be pretty adaptable to a lot of stuff that's changing around you. And I think that the Red Sox really like the way that Pete Fatsy has been able to integrate a lot of things from traditional approaches to statistical and data-driven and biomechanical analyses. But you're right, the shelf lives of pitching coaches and hitting coaches, these are not positions with great longevity. So, unless you're Pete and live in Central Mass, rent, don't own.
All right, so let's wrap it up, because that was a great conversation to have on the 100th edition of 310 to Left. I was trying to put that all in perspective, like, do you own anything that's 100? Do you have an antique that is 100? What lasts to be 100?
My children accuse me of being 100 or more, so there we go.
My children accuse my jokes of being 100, so I think that's kind of the same idea. So here's to 100 more, my friend. We started this a couple years ago. It's been a blast. I hope we continue doing it for a long time.
It's totally agree. Here's to the next 100, and we'll plan better for the next milestone.
Yeah, let me know next time we have a milestone. That's all. I'm a grinder, Alex. I'm just looking at the next one. I'm laser focused. We also want to thank everybody at New England Ford for being along for the ride, pun intended. Great sponsor, and we appreciate having them on, as always. 310 to Left is presented by your New England Ford dealers and the F-Series, America's best-selling truck 48 years in a row, and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. For Alex Speier, I'm Tom Caron. Thanks for checking out the 100th edition of 310 to Left. We'll see you for number 101.